Okay.
Good afternoon and welcome to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM. Each week, I have the pleasure of interviewing somebody from the world of business who can share their knowledge, insights, and tips to help you with your business challenges. If there's a topic you would like covered, or if you feel you can make a contribution, please email me at yourbusiness@dublincityfm.ie, and perhaps we'll be having a chat here one day soon. My guest today is a returning guest. He's the founder of Better Together, Together Better, a proud Cork man now living in Frankfurt. And if you'd like to pick up the first part of this interview, it was conducted on the 12th of February 2021, and you can get that on my SoundCloud channel. I'm delighted to welcome back Michael Keating to the You and Your Business studio. Hiya, Michael.
Hi, Alec. Thank you so much for having me back.
Good. I'm not going to get you to torture us about the weather in Frankfurt because we've been suffering very badly here this summer. So the
Yeah,
fact that you're even smiling makes me
the
feel
sun is
uncomfortable.
shining. I won't go into it.
Good. Well, the sun isn't shining here. So a lot has happened in the 15 months since we last spoke, but maybe you'll just give our listeners a quick
Yes.
rundown of where we left it off and what's
Yes.
got you to where you are.
Yeah. So again, maybe to just give people some perspective of who I am and where I'm from. And Michael Keating, originally from Cork, lived the first period of my time in Cork City in Douglas, went to school there, but left Ireland very early, 18, 19, to see the world, to experience the world. And really back then in the mid 80s, that was a real challenge to see the world. But
Yeah,
I did and got the opportunity to live in many countries like America, in Korea, and then here in Europe for many, many years. And my passion was always people.
right.
So I got into the people business. Back then, it used to be called the personnel department. Then, of course, the HR word, which I didn't really resonate with. I say today I'm in human relations, not human resources. So for me, that's where I still am after a big corporate career for about 30 years.
Right.
I got out of the corporate world and made my own little business. And here I am 7, 8 years on as my own business person, working in collaboration, of course, with others
Sure.
to achieve what I would say more humanity in the world.
And tell me why Frankfurt? I mean, as somebody as well
Yeah.
traveled as yourself, what sort of resonated with you with Frankfurt?
Yeah. Of course, the reason to come back to Frankfurt, because I was actually previously in Germany, is love was the first. Of course, I met a woman here, or actually in Greece, I met her, but she's a German lady. And we had then 3 lovely kids together.
Right.
We had then actually lived in Ireland for a period of time, but ultimately I was going up the stairs of the career step, HR director, and I got that opportunity to be at that level back here in Germany. So that's why I came back to Frankfurt 22 years ago, take
Right.
on a big job. And of course, I grew my career to like VP level, which of course is great. Yeah, it sounds really sexy and dynamic and all of that. But in a way, I lost myself a little bit. And I burnt the candle on both ends, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, I
And
do.
yeah, ultimately went through a depression, burnout, all that kind of stuff, and had a reevaluation of my life. And so that's why I decided to get out of the corporate and be my own sort of business. And I've been doing that, as I said, for 7, 8 years.
Tell me this. When you start recognizing burnout, I mean, so many
Yes.
people go through it, and I'm not sure that they
Yeah.
recognize the signals
Yeah.
that are in front of them. Maybe you'd like to talk about that and what people should be looking out for.
Of course. Yeah. Part of the issue of recognizing it is mostly people around you recognize it actually more than yourself. Because in my case, particularly, I was at a very high level, VP. I was working at least 100-hour weeks, yeah, traveling here, there, and everywhere. It felt dynamic. You felt somehow in a flow,
Right.
but actually your energy level was always getting weaker and weaker and weaker. And you kind of sense that yourself in a moment of calm. And I say that as a moment of calm
Right.
because those times came very irregularly. Yeah. In
Sure.
fact, my people around me, let's say, they were able to see more that I was getting to that stage of burnout. Yeah. And then ultimately, I started denying that. And no, I'm fine. I'm fine. This idea that you feel like, no, I'm not. I'm in control. I'm, yeah, etc. But ultimately, then you do just crash. Yeah.
Right.
And it's about building up yourself again. And that takes time, First of all, you have to admit to yourself
Right.
that, hey, I was in a serious situation. It could have cost me my life, because unfortunately there is some people who get so desperate and have such an impact through depression, etc., that they take their own lives. I
Wow.
didn't get to that stage,
Hmm.
so thank God for that. But I can tell you, it's much better to actually see the signs, yeah, which is really, this idea that you're in a flow, but it's actually too much on your whole energy system, yeah,
Yeah.
and you know that yourself, yeah, you can feel that yourself. There'll be periods of time when you go on to holidays where you actually realize that.
Right.
You
I,
just have to admit it to yourself.
yeah. It's amazing. I used to find myself, I must probably be in a similar situation. First 3 days of holidays, I'd probably just sleep.
Mm-hmm. There
You
you
know.
go.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. You see, you're so worn out, you're going to actually have to take that necessary sleep and rest and etc. just to try to survive, and that's a major sign.
So if somebody is listening here and
Yeah.
starting to recognize the signs,
Yes.
what's the first step they should take, you think, just to reevaluating themselves and their lives?
Yeah. I think probably the most important step is to talk to somebody they love around them. So, their partner, their kid, whatever. Yeah, somebody who they trust, because this
Right.
is very important. You're sharing something that, maybe they haven't really noticed, a best friend. Yeah, but really reaching out to another human being that you trust to share that. Now, it takes, of course, vulnerability to do that, because you're admitting to yourself that you're somehow this idea of weak or whatever, but that's all stupid. Actually, get that out of your mind. Yeah. Yeah. If you want to be fully embracing your true, 100% human self, it's okay. It's fine. Just do it. Yeah. Just do it. Reach out to that person. And then in that conversation, solutions will come. So you may think about then going to your general GP. Yeah. To think about, okay, what can I do from a medical point of view?
Right.
Or is it more actually from a behavioral point of view? I ultimately went to a behavioral therapist who
All
was
right.
actually able to help me with my behaviors, because it wasn't much about the medical part. Some people have depression where it's actually they need to take some pharma and it improves their serotonin levels, etc. I did that at the start. It didn't work for me, so fairly
Right.
quickly they realized it actually it's more behavioral thing about me, and so I went to a behavioral therapist, and he was able to really help me over about 8 month time. So, again, you're not going to be able to solve it yourself, and this is the really the trueness that you have to admit to yourself.
Right.
I can't go alone here. I've got to such a state in my own being
Yes.
that I need the help of others, and you know what?
Right.
That's fine. It
Wow.
really is fine. I can tell you, it is fine.
Wow. And if you're just listening to us now, you're listening to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM, where my guest today is Michael Keating. And we're just talking about a very important aspect of life, discovering burnout, discovering how you can find a path to a new way. But the first thing, of course, is about recognizing that there is a problem around it. I suppose, Michael, since we last talked, I mean, COVID was even more impactful. A lot
Yes.
of people took the opportunity to stand back and reevaluate themselves. But what
Yes.
I think I'm seeing is people now forgetting that reevaluation and getting back on the treadmill. What is your experience of it?
Yeah, there's a mix of that going on, Alec. I would say COVID was great in some ways. Of course, we won't talk about the death toll and the
Sure.
impact to society from all of that. But in terms of giving people a moment in time to reflect and to maybe what I call the word reinvent themselves, or at least embrace a new kind of idea about how they can be as a human being and
Right.
how they're going to live. That was very powerful, and people took the time, amazingly enough, and some took action, which is of
Yes.
course great as well. So people went from awareness, which is a great step, into they acknowledged a certain aspect of their life, of their being, and some of them acted
Right.
and changed. They got out of maybe a corporate job, they did something else, but some of them did not. They stayed in that, I don't want to call it status quo, but they stayed in that acknowledged set of human being, and then they went back to their jobs.
Right.
But of course, their state of the job and the work where the place where they currently were working has also changed.
Yes.
a lot of organizations have had to reinvent themselves as well. We all know about the hybrid models, etc. And classically, we can see there's a real trend going in the world that people want to work differently.
Yes, of course.
You know, they don't want to have to commute 3 hours a day to go for an 8 hour, 9 hour job. They want to have a different standard of life. They've come to enjoy a certain way of being, a certain way of living.
Right.
This is something companies have to think about dramatically. Yeah. And if I would, look in aspects of the world and what companies have done, some companies are, of course, again, the first movers. They're
Yes.
trying things, they're moving it on. Why not try it and see what happens? Whereas others are like laying back and saying, let's wait and see. Those
Yes.
companies are wait and see. They're not going to do well because people will move to those companies who are first movers. Take the perfect example, somebody who lived in Dublin had the opportunity in COVID to relocate to 2 hours away, and now is being forced to go back to the office because
Right.
the company hasn't moved on their hybrid policy. Sorry, the guy is going to say, there's plenty of other companies I can go to. Cheers, take care. So
Yeah.
companies really need to start to move in the idea of how do we reinvent, let's call it the future of work, the
Yes.
future of how we actually work and live. And this is a major challenge for organizations. I work with some of these here in Germany, interesting enough. And, some of them, like I said, embrace the idea that we need to think of what is the employee experience? How can we make it even better to keep them happier, to keep them innovative, to keep them, really performing? Whereas
Sure.
others are just, let's go back to business kind of stuff. And they're
And
not going to make it.
yeah, let's go back to the old ways. It's been
Yeah.
quite interesting because there's been an impact, as you said, on the future of work. Let's look at it from the management side. I mean, there
Yes.
are those, of course, who
Yeah.
never want to change the ways. Let's always do it the old way.
Yes.
And I think there's a big shock on the horizon for them.
Indeed. It's use the word management, and of course, what we really truly need is leadership. Okay, and
Yes.
there is a big difference between that. Yeah. Um, People can manage processes. Leaders lead people. Yeah. And I would say that has also taken a dynamic turn in terms of the expectations of leadership. I work with some of them in coachings and mentoring situations where themselves have to embrace their idea of being more human. Yeah, in other sense, their vulnerability. In other sense, not knowing all the answers. Yeah, because in COVID, of course, no one knew any of the answers. Which made it easier, of course, for everybody because all leaders didn't know what the hell do we do here? How do we move on? But the classic is the movement, the momentum. Do something, do anything. Yeah, but
Right.
move. Okay. And those leaders who I would say take the personal risk of their own maybe image and their own ego,
Sure.
they said, let's do something. Let's move it on. Let's keep it going. I'm vulnerable. I don't know exactly what I'm doing. He reaches out to his staff. He reaches out to his company and says those kind of things. That was a powerful way to say, I'm a leader. I don't know what I'm doing, but hey, we're going to do this together. Yeah. And this is a key word, in my philosophy about how to do things better. Yeah. Is indeed together. Yeah. That's why my company's name is Better Together, Together Better. So what I'm saying here is really leaders are embracing then uncertainty,
Right.
the complexity of the situation, that it's we don't know what we're really doing. And emotionally, they're they're putting it out there that I am also not that 100% capable of managing all these issues here that are coming during COVID. And so the leaders that did this in a way to say to people, this is part of growing also yourself and our organization, they improved dramatically in COVID. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Some of the companies in COVID, they ramped up their kind of coaching programs or their mentoring programs for their senior leaders and even for their junior leaders
Right.
to help them have outside kind of people like me to interact with, to make them confident to do these things. And these companies are so much further in terms of their development than the others that said, oh, no, we don't do this in COVID. We got to keep our money inside, all this kind of, crazy stuff.
I mean, there's further challenges there because with the workforce and a younger generation coming up, words like loyalty are not as part of the conversation as they would have been in the past. So that's one part I'll be interested in your sort of views on. And the second part is
Mm,
the interaction of technology on people and their potential loss of the soft skills that are
yeah,
needed.
yeah. So I mean, each generation has what I would call unique sort of skills and a unique offer of what they can give a company. Okay. Companies need to do much, much more to identify these unique skills that people have. So, of course, we know about the Gen Z kids, etc. They're
Sure.
born with a smartphone. To be honest, yeah, they're technically savvy,
Right.
um, but perhaps, and this is only perhaps, their soft skills are maybe less because they're more used to communicating with a smartphone than in other ways, human to human. Okay, there's other people in organizations like the baby boomers or even one below that who have only ever learned to communicate, human to human. Okay. So, you can put these together. And I know of a company who've actually done that. So they've done what they've basically called mentoring between seniors and juniors. Yeah. So
Right.
they pair people, a junior person and a senior person together, and
Wow.
each of them are helping to, let's say, guide them and build each other in certain skill sets that are not maybe originally there from themselves. Okay, so in this case, maybe the Gen Z kid, he's helping the senior guy who's maybe not so technically affine to be able to maybe use technology more easier,
Sure.
whereas then the older senior guy, he's helping this younger woman to be more sort of verbal and more emotional in her communication when she's talking with other human beings. Yeah. So this
Yeah.
is an idea that has grown out of the necessity, to be honest, yeah,
Right.
of looking at how do we use these unique skills of these generations. Yeah. And some companies again are embracing this,
Right.
some are not. Yeah.
I think that's quite a creative way of dealing with things because, like, there is a tendency for organizations who are moving forward all the time and think that, oh, those people are for the scrap heap, and forgetting that they have a certain skill set that is as valuable today as it always has been. And also the young generation coming up, their sort of familiarity with technology is also a transferable skill. Yeah, I like that. I think that's a very, very good idea.
Absolutely. And if people are interested to kind of look at what companies are doing, the kind of key word that people are using now is called upskilling. Yeah. So it's this
Yes.
idea of bringing skills up to a certain kind of dynamic that may be necessary in our new kind of way of working. And it is learning by doing. A lot of organizations are trying different things also from a learning perspective about what they're putting out there. So this classic idea that learning can only happen in a classroom environment
Yes.
is also changing. There's the availability of webinars, little YouTube videos, actually even just online calls, like what
Yes.
we're having now, and having even sort of mini training sessions
Yes.
on a very individualistic way of doing it. So the focus is really on, do we know this unique human we have in our business, and how best can we actually develop them, whatever age bracket they are. Yeah, because like you said there as well, Alec, there are some people who are in, let's say, the third phase of their life. They're getting towards the end of their working lives. Um, some of the companies are not giving enough value to these humans. Yeah, and they're losing out dramatically. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
I can tell you here in Germany, we have an issue, of course, with the baby boomer and the population situation, that in reality, more people need to work longer. Yeah. And when I mean longer, they need to work like to 65, 70, even 75. Yeah. In Germany. Otherwise, we will have major issues in terms of, having enough people to serve what we need in terms of business here. Yeah. So recognizing and valuing that level of employee, even if they've had a long-term career, and in some ways they're maybe, the word is used, slowing down, you know, well, let's look at what's unique about what they can give back. They have this huge wisdom.
Yes,
They
of
have
course.
created, they've seen many different things happen over the 30, 40 years maybe they're in a company. How can we use that And as I said, one of these companies have done that in a way where they've basically partnered them with a younger person in their organization. Yeah.
Yeah. And if
Um,
you're just joining us now, you're listening to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM, where my guest today is Michael Keating. And we're just talking about the creativity around blending skills between different generations and how some companies are managing to get the best out of everything there. Sounds a fantastic idea. And and you're talking Germany, you were about to mention a company there, I think, were you, Michael?
yeah, no. So no, I wasn't going to give you a specific, but what I would say was, in reality, there is some companies who have also started to look at the organization as a topic in itself. In other sense, do we have the right kind of organization structure to actually facilitate this new idea of work? Yeah.
Right.
And ultimately, there has been a lot of research done on what does new work mean.
Yes.
um, there's been a famous book. It's called Reinventing Organizations. It's quite dated now. It's actually nearly 15 years old.
Right.
But it goes into the idea of, well, what can an organization look like to actually make it more aligned to both the goals of the organization and the goals of the employees who are in an organization. In other sense, there's much more this idea of the sharing of not just the sharing of the profits, but also the sharing of the value they create between each other. And they show many examples about how they've actually changed the organization in terms of
Right.
small teams, in terms of the structures. The hierarchy is removed. Yeah. And you think, oh my God, how can an organization not have a hierarchy? It is
Right.
possible. There
Yeah.
is examples of how to generate that. And also looking at how do we share, the profits, and how do we share the winnings, and how do we look back to give to sustainable nature and the world we have around us. So these kind of themes are coming dramatically now, also because of COVID. Yeah, because more organizations are looking and saying, oh my gosh, okay, we need to be more sustainable in all we do. This is what the world now expects. This is what the consumer expects. If we are creating a product or a service, how can we make it more sustainable for
Right.
our environment, and sustainable for us in a way that we can be a company that lives in 100 years time? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's also about looking inward and saying, do we have the right kind of organization? And you can imagine that is
Yes.
difficult for organizations, because it means change if ultimately they were going to look at redesigning their organization. And that means maybe removing some hierarchies or redeploying people into other areas. And of course, some people are a little bit hesitant to embrace that change. But ultimately, we all know change is part of life. We
Change
we
is.
change every day. It's just we've loved to go with those changes.
Mm.
Some of us have changed to get married, changed to have a family, changed to do this. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I suppose the caveat here is you need to try to think about how do we embrace the idea of change in organizations so people are happy to make the change.
I suppose, believe it or not, Mike, in the 3 minutes we've left, and that's
Yeah.
how quick that goes.
Whoa.
Uh,
Okay.
you have decades of experience in
Yeah.
what you would have called, HR and all of these things.
Yes.
A, what you're learning in Germany, are we seeing it in Ireland yet, or are we behind the curve? And
Yes.
more importantly,
Yeah.
what next for you? And
Yeah. Very nice. No, I would say, and I hate to compare and contrast, and you just asked me to compare between Germany and Ireland. There's some things where I think Ireland are certainly moving forward quite quickly in comparison to Germany. This whole digitalization and the idea of how do we use these tools of digitalization, including AI,
right,
to take out the stupid work in organizations and people, is much further in Ireland, because of probably the technology companies that are in Ireland, than in
right,
Germany. Yeah. Germany is made up of very many small, medium enterprises, which means as of 250 people, which is a crazy definition. I know you think, oh my gosh,
not the
that's a
Irish
small,
one
medium
anyway.
enterprise. And there's about 2,000 of them in Germany. So it's like they make up the backbone, but they're slow to make these dramatic changes. Yeah. Ireland is in a way embrace that kind of way of being, if I use that word, because of having technology in our island for so long. Yeah.
Yes, of
So I
course.
think there's a different approach and a different acceptance, which is great for Ireland. Germany, I would say, has done a lot from a manufacturing point of view, of course, because they're a big manufacturing
Yes.
organization and country, in terms of using robots. Yeah. So
Right.
automation. So ultimately, I think if there's any Irish businesses out there thinking about, okay, we produce X, Y, Z, what could we do to improve that? They really could come to Germany and look at some of the examples about how German companies use automation and robotics. Um, Clearly, it was because of the price of employees. Yeah, they wanted to, of course,
Yes, of
use
course.
a more efficient, effective pricing in terms of the labor output. But it could be something Irish companies could look at. And if anybody's out there and wants to reach out to me, please, I would be delighted to make that bridge for you into other companies. I do know quite a few of them.
Right. And where can people find your contact details?
Yeah, so best is if you look on to LinkedIn. Yeah, Michael Keating. Yeah, you'll find me under that. Germany, I'm the only guy. I think there's 3 Keatings in the whole of Germany according to the telephone book. So, and also, if you want to just look up, there's a website called Linktree, as an linktr.ee/Michael Keating. You'll find my connections and my details all there.
Right. Well, there's a great way to finish a very quick show and a huge amount of insights, which I must thank you for, Michael. Fascinating. I will definitely have you back because there is more to be discussed around this. Special thanks to our guest today, Michael Keating. Also, thanks to Sam on Sound. The podcast of today's show will be available on dublincityfm.ie from tomorrow. Thank you for your company. And please remember to join me, Alec Drew, again next week at the same time, 12:30, right here on 103.2 Dublin City FM, for another edition of You and Your Business.